Sleep. Based on your downloads of the various sleep experts we've had on this podcast, it is a topic about which we are all looking for answers. And frankly, I'm right there with you. There's a good reason for that based on the way it influences all other aspects of life. In fact, our published research on mental toughness even showed sleep played an important role there too. Today, you'll get to add to your sleep toolbox with one of the best in the business. Welcome to the latest episode of the Catalyst Health, Wellness, and Performance Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Bradford Cooper, and today's episode features Dr. Meeta Singh. She is a sleep physician who works with the world's greatest athletes from the NFL to NBA, NHL to Major League Baseball. In fact, she showed me her World Series ring, and it's pretty cool. Today, she'll not only be sharing steps we can take to improve our sleep, but also how that sleep enhances our immunity. If you're an organization looking to integrate best-in-class health and wellness coaching into your current wellness strategy without having to start over, you'll want to take a look at uscorporatewellness.com, the organization known for providing best-in-class coaching since 2007. Whether you're an employer looking to provide meaningful support and growth for your team, an EAP looking to add coaching to your offerings, or a benefit consultant seeking to optimize your clients' outcomes, the data shows personalized, credible coaching is likely the answer you've been seeking. The website is uscorporatewellness.com or email anytime, results@uscorporatewellness.com. Now, let's talk sleep, immunity, and what we can be doing to optimize our current reality in the midst of all that's happening around us right now with Dr. Meeta Singh. Dr. Singh, it is such a privilege to bring you back onto the podcast, a critical time. I wanted to talk through this concept of immunity and sleep and the connection and what people can be doing on a practical level. So first of all, thanks for coming back.
Well, thank you for having me.
Let's start with a brief explanation of sleep and the circadian system, just as some background for our audience to set the tone for today.
Okay, well, so sleep is a normal, reversible behavioral state in which there's disengagement from the environment and unresponsiveness to the environment. And Brad, think of it, we spend a third of our lives sleeping.
Yeah,
and,
we hope.
And if sleep wasn't really serving an essential function, that's a colossal waste of time.
Yeah.
And a major mistake from the evolutionary point of view, especially when you think about how vulnerable we are to predators and other threats in the environment, lying with our eyes shut. So at its most basic level, because sleep forces both the mind and the body to be inactive, rest and restoration can occur. Now, the circadian rhythms are an intrinsic timekeeping clocks that we have that regulate almost all physiological functions on a daily basis. And for us human beings, the master circadian clock or your biological clock is located in your brain, and it's synchronized to the local environment by exposure to light and dark.
Okay.
So in addition, like I just said, in addition to that master circadian clock, we also have local clocks in almost every cell in our body. Which so physiological functions are under local control, and they're controlled by the master clock. And the master clock is like a master conductor. It's coordinating the timing and the function of all these clocks, and therefore all the functions of the body. So one thing, because we have a clock, and because we have certain timings that we have to be awake and interacting with our external environment, and at certain timings we should be asleep, and we should be avoiding the external world. This is actually coordinated. And so this is actually, it's part of the survival strategy that ensures that we will engage as well as disengage from environments at appropriate times. And of course, in our 24/7 society, human beings, we're the only animals that routinely ignore this, because we often sleep when our biological clock is telling us to be awake. And, right. And hopefully, just in the last few days, when people have started working from home, that has changed. So maybe people are sleeping more in alignment to their circadian clocks and to their chronotype. So let me just define. Chronotype is, intuitively, it's easy to understand. It's whether you're a morning lark or a night owl.
Sure.
And it's just your individual, it's genetically predetermined predisposition that modifies whether you prefer to be more active in the morning or more active in the evening.
Coming back into this idea of immunity and the connection here, can you set a baseline for us there? What would be a non-technical explanation of our immune system?
Okay, so this is how I would explain it. Your skin and your mucosal surfaces, they act like a physical barrier. And you have some peptides attached to them that'll prevent any infection from entering your body. And that is your first line of defense.
Okay.
But once any pathogen, a virus, a bacteria, a fungus, a parasite enters your body, then there's an army of immune cells that gets recruited into action. And the actions are of two kinds. First, it's called innate immune cells. So these will fight any kind of infection. So they, as soon as you have a pathogen, they try to fight the pathogen, and they have, cool functions like they can eat the pathogen or they can release a poison that will kill them. And the second kind of immunity is that if the pathogen escapes this first line of innate immunity, then the second line is called adaptive immunity that gets recruited. And that has a more focused effect. So this takes a few days. And one of the things that happens is that the immune cells now learn about the pathogen. They learn how to mount a focused response. And this immune memory is then stored to be used in future times. So if you ever get infected again, those smart immune cells know exactly what to do. So they will, jump and metaphorically jump to do that exactly, to protect you. And that is how, say, for example, vaccines work. So in a very controlled fashion, we introduce a pathogen, and then your adaptive immune cells learn what to do. So that if you get exposed to the same pathogen, immune cells then use that stored knowledge and they kill or inactivate the pathogen.
Talk me through the idea of, I got a flu shot this year, and then next year I'll need to get another one. I know the strain changes slightly, but if the body already recognizes it, can you walk us through again in basic sense why that's necessary on an annual basis versus, okay, you've got it, now your body will recognize it and fight that off going forward?
Right. So the easiest way for us to understand this is to understand the answer is in the question itself. It's because the flu virus has different strains. And so every year they're trying to come up with a vaccine that has the most recent strain so that they can protect as many people as possible. In contrast, say, for example, the measles vaccine, right? So that we know that pathogen doesn't change.
That's
so
a constant.
Right. So if you've been vaccinated as a child, then you really are protected for the rest of your life. Similarly, the chicken pox or,
right.
And of course, sometimes you have to give booster shots so that
Sure.
your immunity, so that you're strengthening and adding to that immunity.
Okay. All right. Let's jump into the practical stuff. So you've given us a good baseline on what's happening kind of behind the scenes, if you will, inside our bodies. Now for the person sitting out there going, I want to enhance my immunity as much as I possibly can. We're going to jump into sleep. But in addition to sleep, what would be some other things that would play a big role in our body's immunity?
So it's funny because when we were just having this conversation with the immunologist who works on our floor, allergist and immunology specialist. And so to clarify, your innate immunity cannot be boosted. And you wouldn't want it to be. So, because if your innate responses were stimulated, then you'd constantly feel unwell. You'd have a runny nose, fever, lethargy, depression. So the efficiency of adaptive immunity is, of course, harnessed by the vaccine. And while in response, to your question, while there are many products that claim to boost immunity, that concept doesn't make sense scientifically, because you never want to boost cells of just one kind, because that's not necessarily a good thing. And it can actually result with, you can have serious side effects. So the best thing you can actually do to maintain your immune system is to adopt a healthy living strategies that will benefit the entire body, including your immune system. So, eat a healthy diet rich in fruits and vegetables, exercise regularly, maintain a healthy weight, quitting smoking, drinking alcohol only in moderation, and in reducing stress, and maybe in today's world, avoiding infection through regular hand washing and getting enough sleep. So there's
back to the basics.
Yes, it is back to the basics.
All right. Well, specific to sleep, why is sleep one of, and I would probably say from my knowledge, the most important piece of the puzzle when it comes to that broader immunity?
Well, so this is where there has been ample research. So it turns out that, again, thinking about what the basic function of sleep is, it is to restore a physiological function, right? So you really need sleep to restore your immunity. So firstly, if you get less sleep, it reduces the number of WBCs, lymphocytes, monocytes, T cells, B cells, natural killer cells, neutrophil, basophils, all that army of immune cells that we need to attack pathogens. So there's a study that shows that just one night of partial sleep deprivation, the efficacy of natural killer cells, which, by the way, I love that name, declines to about 75% of its full strength. So in short,
wow.
So if you skimp on your sleep, you increase the chances of catching an infection. So there are studies, again, that show that sleeping less than 6 hours increase the risk of respiratory infections in military recruits and the general population. And then there was another study, and this I thought was really interesting. So that what they did is that there's an experimental challenge to the common cold rhinovirus. And after that, their sleep was manipulated. So if you were sleeping less than 6 hours, the likelihood of developing a cold after being exposed to the virus increased 4 to 5 times.
I saw that. Wow. That was an amazing study. Wow.
Right. So another way sleep supports your immune system, of course, is by, it supports the immune system's memory consolidation function. And that's how it helps the adaptive immune system. So think, we know that sleep is essential for memory, right? So memory processes in the brain are divided into 3 phases. During the day, while you're awake, information is taken in or encoded. During your sleep, this information is then transferred from the initial labile sites to the long-term storage sites. And this process is called consolidation. And then, of course, while you're awake again, you recall this remembered information. So very similar to this, Brad. During the encoding phase, the immune system takes in information about the pathogen. And while you're asleep, especially during slow wave sleep, this information is consolidated and then transferred to other immune cells. And when we get exposed to the pathogen again, the immune cells retrieve the stored information and charge into action. And so, again, there's research that supports this. There was a study that showed that sleeping less than 7 hours per night in the 7 days surrounding Hep B vaccine decreased the antibody response. And then there's another one that looks at healthy adults who got sleep the night after being vaccinated against Hep A. So if you got enough sleep, there was a 2-fold greater antibody concentration, which is what you want to develop 1 month later, compared to subjects who were kept awake the night after getting the injection.
That's so fascinating. I saw both those studies, and the level of differential from enough sleep to not enough sleep was so significant, with that being the only variable. That, wow, big time. Big time. All right. So while we're recording this, we're in the midst of this whole COVID-19 virus. What role does sleep play in that whole equation? How can individuals who are hearing this utilize sleep as an extra line of defense right now with everything that's being talked about?
Well, I think the take-home message really for everyone should be to think about sleep as being your best defense, right? So eventually, of course, we're hoping that a vaccine comes around.
Yeah.
And you want to be, and from what we just discussed, you want to be well rested, leading up to the vaccine, and then well rested once the vaccine, so that it can do what it needs to do. But you want to try and get enough sleep, because we know that, it first of all protects you from getting an infection, and then helps you fight an infection better.
Okay, so once the infection happens, let's flip this around the other way. What happens to our sleep once we get that infection? Is there any interplay there? Well,
so again, very good question. There is no doubt that you will become sleepier once you have an infection. So this, it's just an old saying that a good night's sleep is the best medicine for an infection. And this relationship, obviously, between the immune system and sleep is, it's bidirectional and more complex. So if you have an acute infection, typically we'll see intensified sleep, and this is considered beneficial. So go for it and get sleep and get well rested and recover.
All right. So the virus itself isn't the only downside we're facing right now. The whole social distancing, the uncertainty, all the things that are going through people's head. We've got increased depression, anxiety, other mental health concerns. Walk us through the role sleep plays in those, because it plays a pretty significant role from my understanding.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So firstly, it does feel like free fall, doesn't it?
It does.
Especially the current times, whatever we once held as solid is no longer something we can rely on. And, as a doctor, I have watched the progress of the COVID-19 pandemic with, altering measures of fear, frustration, fascination, dread, horror, and we. So first of all, we do need to recognize that mixed in with all these feelings we're having of anger and disappointment, powerlessness, blame, is grief, right? Sadness of losing our way of life.
Yeah.
And so while on one hand, we have just spent a few minutes talking and telling people to sleep well, people, they may have ample time to sleep, and now they may actually be able to sleep aligned to their biological clocks, but fear and anxiety may actually keep people awake. So people may have difficulty initiating or maintaining sleep. They may feel unrefreshed. They may have difficulty turning their minds off and obsessing about all things coronavirus. And Brad, I was, just before we started, I was reading in the news that liquor sales have increased. So
of course.
Using alcohol to help you sleep is always a slippery slope and not to be recommended.
Yeah.
But people who have pre-existing mental health issues, depression, anxiety, they will need more support, because sleep, may deteriorate further. And it's nothing like lying awake to make our problem seem worse, right? Terrible time to try and filter out negative thoughts while you're sleeping. Plus, all the more reason to pay attention or try to protect your sleep, because if you sleep poorly at night, that means you'll be more sleepy or tired the next day, and as a result, you're less engaged in pleasurable activities or social relationships, right? And less likely, do things like exercise, all of which are coping skills right now. Things that we want to do during the day.
Yeah, immense.
But a short answer to your question is this sleep and mental health are very closely intertwined. In fact, you can't speak about mental health without giving sleep health a seat at that table. Insomnia,
well said.
Poor sleep can often become, it can, number one, it can predispose you to developing, mental health issues.
Mm-hmm.
It can make it, and then, if you're trying all the common sense things, then maybe we can discuss the common sense things that we can try to get enough sleep after this. But after you've done that, if you still continue to have issues, then, reach out to your primary care doctor. There is something called a single shot CBTI. So single shot, 1 hour long cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia that is meant for acute insomnia, especially acute insomnia that occurs in very stressful situations. And this is something that trained clinical practice, yes, can do. And this would be very, very useful, because we know insomnia can it can worsen so many other things and make you more angry, more depressed, more anxious. And if you can treat this acute insomnia right now, that'll result, less people will progress to chronic insomnia, and it'll also lessen the amount of money that one would, healthcare dollars spend
right.
on treating the chronic illnesses that might develop.
You mentioned alcohol. Let's pop onto that one since it came up in the conversation. We know the sales are going up. We know people are leaning on that. My very limited understanding is first glass, probably not a big deal one way or the other. Second glass is where you start to see a decrease in depth of sleep. Can you expand upon that? Correct me, walk us down that path of what people need to know if they are grabbing that extra glass of wine or whatever it might be?
Well, so number one is, I would say that this would be a time to, for sure, follow the the recommendations that medical societies make about how much alcohol you should be drinking. So I think it's about 1 or 2 glasses for men and maybe 1 glass for women.
Mm-hmm.
But alcohol does help some people to relax, and it does make it easier to fall asleep. However, as the night progresses and as it gets metabolized, it tends to fracture sleep, especially dream sleep. And so, one of the things that might happen, of course, is that you may have really vivid nightmares. And I know a lot of people are already describing, vivid, scary dreams because they're already anxious.
Mm-hmm.
Right. The second thing that happens, of course, is that as time progresses, it's easy to develop tolerance to alcohol, which means you need more and more of the alcohol to get the same effect. And that's not, that's something to watch out for. So that would be number 2. Number 3 is that, initially, although alcohol initially will increase the amount of deep sleep, you develop tolerance to that, which means that after some time it starts reducing deep sleep. So, time to be more extra careful, especially since people are extra stressed. Plus, they may not have somewhere to drive and go to work the next day, right? And sometimes people keep that in mind and say, well, I won't have that extra drink because I do have to get into a car and drive, at 7:30 next morning. But maybe people are going to bed later, and that's no longer as relevant.
Right. All right. Let's get into some of the things that people may not be thinking about. In terms of our sleep, what are things we might be ignoring that we haven't already talked about that now's a great time to tune into?
Well, the first thing I'll say is that, and this is something I tell everyone that I work with, worrying about your sleep is going to make it worse. This may create a vicious cycle of poor sleep and worrying. And worrying will disturb your sleep even if you're not an anxious person.
Right.
So it's important to understand that waking up at night is normal. So remember we talked once when we talked a long time ago, how you sleep in different stages of sleep. And typically, you have light sleep, deep sleep, dream sleep, wake up. It's about a 90-minute cycle. So approximately 90 minutes, everybody wakes up. Most times you turn over, go back to sleep. And so some people wake up and may worry about it. Others don't remember waking up. So worrying about your sleep usually makes sleep worse. So instead of going down the pathway of thinking, I will not be able to function tomorrow unless I get back to sleep, try instead thinking, I've been able to function with less sleep before. I will get by okay tomorrow. And don't reach for the phone. Don't start reading the news. There's nothing good on the news right now.
Right. Okay, so easy to say, don't worry, be happy. But you're laying there. It's 3 a.m. You were going to get up at 5:30. You've heard this episode. You remember Dr. Singh saying, "Well, don't worry about it. It doesn't help." What do you do instead? Any tips on what you do instead? Are there little things that you can throw in there to say, okay, instead of thinking about, oh, tomorrow's going to be terrible, instead of just taking that positive attitude, which is a great starting point, are there any little cues you can give us or things to utilize, tools that we could implement when that does happen?
Yes. And that will, it's not unusual for that to happen. The first question I would ask you is, how do you know it's 3:00? So did you turn around and pick up your phone or check the clock to see what time it was in the middle of the night? And that's, that itself will wake you up further, right? You look at the clock, you start making calculations. I went to bed at this time. It's, 3:00 in the morning.
Wait, have you been watching me? What's going on here?
Right. I have, somehow it feels that we've had this discussion before.
Oh, man.
So you don't want to do that. Okay, so if you do wake up and you feel like you're wide awake, then you want to, because it's easy to start thinking about your next day and that starts, or worrying about your sleep, you want to substitute other things during that time. And, people can try different things. So people can do, maybe some sort of breathing exercise in which, have you heard about that 4-7-8?
I have, yeah. Go ahead and explain it, though, because I think it's valuable. We've talked about it on this show before, but it's so helpful, especially right now. So fire away.
And so it's, there's no perfect way of doing this. Any way you try it, it's going to work. You basically concentrate on your breathing. You count slowly up to 4 when you breathe in, then you hold your breath for 7, and then you slowly breathe out through your mouth. And you count 8. You're counting mentally. You can increase or decrease those numbers. It doesn't really matter, but you're trying to concentrate on your breathing. The other thing you can do is something called progressive muscle relaxation, in which you start with your tippy toes and you work up. Concentrating on muscle groups, and you first tense and then relax and go up that way.
Mm-hmm.
You could do other mental exercises like counting backwards, subtracting 3 from 100.
Right.
Or you could read a book, a relaxing book, using a book light in which the light is on the book rather than pointing towards you.
Mm-hmm.
Or you could listen to a podcast, not this one, something a boring podcast.
There we go.
Or books on tape. Anything that stops that cycle of thinking and commanding yourself to sleep, watching for sleep and thinking I'm not able to sleep. Now, a lot of people will say you should, and you can do that. You could get up and go to another room and do something quiet and relaxing, not involving electronics. This would be also not a bad time for some sort of spiritual, exercise. So
Yes.
prayers, reading a spiritual book, meditation. So that the whole point is to take the anxiety part of the equation out.
One of the things I've been doing recently, and I struggle with my own sleep, is I'll go ahead and get up and I'll journal and I'll have my day timer there. And I in the past, I've kept the day timer out of the equation, but I've found that if I can just put down the things I've been thinking about, I need to do this and this needs, and make sure that just spending that 2-3 minutes gets that then out of my head, and I usually can then go back to sleep. Where does any suggestion along those lines? But also, do you recommend the journaling? Do you think that's not such a good idea? What would be your feedback on that?
Actually, there is speaking of journaling, there is definitely a time to daily journal, but maybe do it before you actually fall asleep. So the recommendation is, if you are overwhelmed with worries and anxieties in the middle of the night, try to have a time earlier in the evening, so not too close to your bedtime, and actually call it your worry time, in which you sit down with a journal or a computer or a laptop, and you write down a list of all the things that you are maybe working on the next day, you may be stressed out about, and the whole point is to do it mindfully and do it regularly, so that in the middle of the night, if you do wake up, you can at least try saying to yourself, well, I've already
Got a plan.
Yes, I've already worked on a few things. Now, it's very easy for you and I to say this. These are habits that you have to slowly form.
Sure.
And for a while, Brad, you may be forming these habits without getting an immediate return.
Sure. And that's important to stress. These are not just like exercise or eating well. These do not create that immediate boom. Everything's wonderful now. It's a great point.
And I love, this is not uncommon amongst sleep physicians and therapists when they say that when you're working with, when you're giving these solutions, you've never been successful unless the patient or whoever you're working with doesn't hate you. because these sound unreasonable,
right,
sometimes in the middle of the night. So we're trying to, we're asking you to trust yourself and us in trying to do these on a regular basis to see what happens. And the whole point of this therapy, or the whole point of doing these, is to form a non-judgmental and a happy relationship with your sleep. So the ability to be awake at 3 or 4 in the morning without getting mad at yourself, because getting mad at yourself will definitely awaken you further.
Sure.
So
just to clarify, this worry time, this worry journaling, whatever you call it, you want that to be a couple of hours before bed. You don't want to be going to bed going, okay, I got my whole list of worries. Now let's try to sleep.
Right.
And is there a general time? And I know everyone's different, but would you say 2 hours is kind of a good range?
I would say 3 to 4 hours. You want to do it early.
So kind of right at the end of your workday,
right?
Wrap those up and then close that book and move into your relaxing time.
Yes. And in fact, now that we're talking about it, maybe set an alarm, 2 hours prior or 3 hours prior to your bedtime to remind yourself to do it, so that you don't get aggravated in the middle of the night, say, oh, I know.
I forgot to do that.
Yes.
Got it. Very good. All right. So we've talked about in the middle of the night. Let's talk about the rest of the day. You mentioned before, and our message here is move, fuel, rest, and connect to the four cornerstones of health and well-being. You mentioned essentially all of those too are going to help your sleep. Are there any other key daily habits that maybe we haven't talked about, maybe people don't normally think about, that will help both sleep quantity and sleep quality?
Okay, so always start with the daytime. So especially in today's world, it's really essential to establish a daily schedule, which includes some outdoor activity and daily exercise. And this is essential because creating a schedule will give us some stability in life and help, give us some control over our day-to-day activities. The second thing is daily exposure to outdoor light, which is really essential because it strengthens our circadian system. And so that's something I would suggest that, if you're living in a beautiful place like Colorado, that may be easier because you just have to open your window. But if you're living somewhere where there isn't enough outdoor light, then maybe open your window, turn on some bright lights. Now,
so pause there just for a second. So
yes,
you mentioned the window. I've always thought, mistakenly, obviously, that you need to be outside in that. Does literally just opening the window and having bright sunshine coming in while you're sitting at your desk or sitting reading a book somewhere else, does that actually make a difference, or does the glass block the valuable components there?
No, that does make a difference. Of course, it'd be best if you stepped outdoors. But many times when people have, they're working that they may be tethered to their desk, and if you are, if you can't really move, you don't have time to step outside, then a window becomes really, really valuable. Again, I'll say if you're in a habit of taking naps, especially during these days, if you're working from home, do not exceed 25 to 35 minutes. Because if the nap's too long, you're not going to sleep at night. You want to keep up, definitely. You need to keep up with your social contacts. Remember, it's physical distancing, not social distancing.
Yes.
So pick up the phone, video chat, speak with others, as this is essential for us. All the times, Brad, that we've complained about how technology makes us lonely, let's utilize it to share, to actually reach out to others.
Yeah.
And, share your concern with others. Don't bottle it up. Now, at night, again, it's very essential. And this advice doesn't change. You want to establish a regular bedtime and waking up time. And of course, now we may have the luxury of sleeping more aligned to our circadian clock. So you want to also build a good winding down schedule. And, many times we use alarm clocks in the morning, but maybe it's time that we had an alarm clock that told us that now, there are 35 to 45 minutes till we have to go to bed. So maybe, a hot bath, stretching exercises, again, meditation, prayer, reading a book, listening to a book or a podcast. All of things could be part of your winding down schedule. And note, playing video games or checking social media is not winding down. It's a distraction. And, there are some don'ts, like, and we've touched on that, avoid excessive alcohol ingestion 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. Do not, smoke or chew tobacco. It's a stimulant. Avoid caffeine too close to your bedtime. And that includes, sodas, tea, chocolate. Avoid heavy, spicy, sugary foods. Maybe a light snack. And then keep your bedroom cold and dark, well ventilated. Block out all distracting noises. Eliminate light. And of course, reserve your bedroom for sleep and sex. Because you don't want to start working and doing other things in your bedroom, because then that's what you associate your bedroom with.
Right. All right. We got a lot of folks out there right now. Their kids are on little different schedules than they're used to. Any tips that could make a difference in that arena?
Okay, so that's a very good question. I have 3 teenagers at home right now. Yes, you.
So you're really a pro.
So here's the thing. That's a good question because yes, we know teenage and young adults do have a tendency to be a night owl. But again, don't underestimate the power of artificial light here. And it's always a good idea to remind people of that study. It was done. It was actually done in Colorado, in which they took folks. They took a week-long camping trip, and so with no artificial light. So after the study, all the participants spent because they spend more time exposed to natural light and less time to artificial light. Researchers, they found that their bedtimes and wake-up times had shifted. So they're moving up to 2 hours earlier. So the night owls in the group showed the greatest shifts in the timing of their internal clocks. So night owls started looking more similar to earlier morning types. In other words, night owls were keeping earlier to bed and early to rise schedule. And they were now saying they were feeling alert during the day. And this was this was a week-long camping in the Colorado Rocky Mountains in July.
So there is a difference between the night owls and the larks, as you mentioned before, but
there is.
But habit still drives a significant part of that.
Right. So remember, your circadian clock is synchronized on a daily basis by exposure or avoidance of light. And so your circadian, so my son who is a night owl, his circadian, the timing may be slightly longer, which makes him a night owl versus me, but it's also what he's doing right up to his bedtime. Sure. So if he's going to play a video game or be on the computer right up to the time he's going to go to bed, well, artificial light is going to suppress melatonin. And so this is not new. It's so again, having that 45 to 90 minutes of no electronics, video games, etc., is going to be very useful. And remember, parents are also going to bed a little later right now, right? So if we do both these things, if we try to have or request our teenagers to not be on the computers or electronics very close to their bedtimes, and since we are ourselves going to bed slightly late, I think that there may be a happy medium here.
Sure. Let's talk. You mentioned a couple of tools here. Let's talk about a couple of tools. So the blue light blocking glasses, the artificial light machines that you can get. Is there a role for those? For example, your son playing the video games, if he were to wear those blocking glasses, would that be helpful, or is that more just barely at the margin? And then by the same token, for the artificial light that you can buy, obviously that can help you shift your circadian, but is there help in using that, let's say, late morning in your office when you're not able to get outside until later in the afternoon?
Okay, so in answer to that question, it really depends on a couple of things. Number one is that there is a difference, Brad, there's individual difference to the way individual clocks respond to light. So there's a difference between how much lux of light you need to shift somebody's clock. And if you're very sensitive, even 30 lux will do it. If you're not as sensitive, you might need a bigger, a larger amount of lux of light. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The second thing to keep in mind is how interactive is this device that you're interacting with, right? So I would say there is a role for blue light blocking glasses, because if somebody is not if they still want to work on their computer, then there is a chance that some of the light does get diminished if you're using these glasses. However, if you're playing video games, I think it would be more effective in my son's case if he was, say, reading a textbook versus playing a video game.
Just the mental aspect.
Yes. So that would also play a role.
All right. Well, any other kind of final wrap up things that could make a difference right now with people trying to enhance their sleep, things that we haven't chatted about up to this point, anything that we've missed?
Well, the one thing I want to say, and I have to say this is deeply personal. Understanding the stages of grief is important, and it's also remember that the stages of grief are not linear; they can happen in any order. So, it's not a map, but it provides us with goalposts. So, for example, in today's world, there can be denial, in which we say, well, this virus won't affect us.
Mm-hmm.
It's in China. It's far away. There can be anger. You can be mad. My conference got canceled. You're taking away my activities. Then there's bargaining. Okay, I will social distance for a couple of weeks so that everything gets better. And of course, there's sadness because we don't know where this will end.
Right.
And then finally, there's acceptance that this is happening. And now I have to figure out how to proceed. And like I said, any of these stages can happen in different times of the day, the same day. So, acceptance, as you can imagine, is where the power is going to lie. And I find that if we can find control, if we can control the things we can control, like I will wash my hands, I can keep a safe distance, I can learn to work from home, I can build a new daytime routine, even though I'm at home and my kids think that they can call me whenever they're hungry. I can FaceTime my parents who live far away. I can choose not to check the news every few minutes. I can make sure that I'll make time for bed tonight. I can make sure that I won't drink that second cup of coffee in the afternoon, or I will avoid, drinking an extra glass of wine. I think that's something we can all strive for. And I think that's where we should at least try on a daily basis.
Powerful. What a great way to wrap up. Dr. Singh, it's so good to have you back. Your episode is still one of our most popular we've ever had. There's a good reason for that. And it's just a joy to have you on the other end of the mic.
Thank you so much. Thank you for giving me a platform to speak.
Plenty of application points, weren't there? We're grateful to Dr. Meeta Singh for her insights. You can follow her on Twitter at Meeta, that's Meeta Singh, Singhmd. Thanks for tuning into the #1 podcast for health and wellness coaching. Next week's guest is best-selling author and stoicism guru, Donald Robertson. We had a lot of fun with our discussion. We also tapped into some ways to enhance our approach to life, no matter what it is that we're facing right now. As always, if you ever have questions related to health and wellness coaching, whether how it fits into your own career pursuits or as a way to enhance your organization's employee wellness program, reach out to us. Email is results@catalystcoachinginstitute.com or our website, catalystcoachinginstitute.com. This is Dr. Bradford Cooper signing off. Make it a great rest of your day, and I'll speak with you soon on the next episode of the Catalyst Health, Wellness, and Performance Coaching Podcast, or maybe over at the YouTube coaching channel at youtube.com/coaching channel.